Hi there, welcome back to another video recapping the last two stages in the Fantasy Tour de France. Today we're looking at stages 3 and 4 and also looking ahead to a preview of stage 5 tomorrow. So let's jump in with stage 3 from yesterday. It was a relatively straightforward flat sprint stage with just one Cat 4 climb in the final 30 kilometers or so. Not too much to talk about here except that there was a very notable incident in the run-in to the intermediate sprint. Unfortunately, we saw that Jasper Philipsen crashed, broke his collarbone, a couple ribs, and was taken away to hospital and is out of the race. Obviously, he was in the yellow jersey and green jersey after stage one, so and still in the green jersey after stage two. So that is quite disappointing for all of us, but also makes things a little bit more straightforward in terms of selecting the big sprinters because instead of choosing from the three out and out favorites that were really a tier above any of the other sprinters, now you just have to choose between two, Merlier or Milan. Looking at the results for the day, Tim Merlier just barely pipped Jonathan Milan on the line. I think that this is not super surprising. We've seen Tim Merlier, when he's in the right spot, has had slightly stronger kick, higher top speed, but it was by a matter of a couple centimeters at most. So it was really a coin flip. And I don't think this tells us too much about their form. I think the next sprint stage could go either way. And for a variety of reasons, including the fact that Milan is contesting all of the intermediate sprints that are available, whereas Merlier is not making anywhere near as much of an effort. Combined with the fact that Milan's eligible for the white jersey, if that ever ends up mattering, probably not. And he's just got a better sprint lead out in general that's going to hopefully keep him safe more frequently than Tim. I'm still giving the edge to Milan for a best sprinter in the fantasy league right now, but that remains to be seen. Fortunately, we don't really need to think about that for a few more stages because the next flat sprint stage is on stage 8. Looking at the fantasy points for the day, again, there's not too much that's noteworthy here. There wasn't much of a breakaway, which is a little bit disappointing as a viewer, but I think all the teams knew that it was doomed to fail. There were some riders that were out in the front for various points of the race, but nothing super noteworthy. So the majority of the points went to the pure sprinters. Do want to call out that Soren Werenskold, who sprinted for fourth place on the stage, is looking pretty good, especially considering he's an 11 cost all rounder in the fantasy league. He's looking pretty good, and for those of you who are looking to keep a sprinter on your team but don't want to tie up the points of one of the big two, he's definitely a good one to look at. Also, just noteworthy that Beniam Girmay has been still consistent in all the sprints. He hasn't won either of the first two big sprints, but he's been up there. And something interesting happens if we look at all of the fantasy points scored from stage 1 through stage 3, which is we see that unexpectedly, Beniam Girmay has sort of quietly become the leading point scorer. Now, this is just a little bit misleading because uh, most people are not using their stage winner bonus, their road captain designation each day on Beniam Girmay. They usually are more likely to have a Jasper Philipsen, a Milan, a Merlier, etc., who will get the bonus. So by raw points, those riders might have scored more for you if you were selecting them as their road captain. But if you ignore the road captain bonus, Beniam Girmay is the highest scorer by a fair bit, by 50 points over Mathieu van der Poel after 3 stages, even though he hasn't won a stage. And then also, if we look at the most efficient rider in terms of points per cost, we can see that Soren Werenskold is the most efficient rider with 30.91 points per star cost. So quietly, Soren Werenskold and Beniam Girmay, these second tier sprinters, have been racking up a lot of points for people who were lucky enough to pick them up in the first couple stages. One other thing to note is that Danny Van Poppel was relegated. Um, if you look at the replay, it was, a little bit of hargy-bargy. So I don't think there's too much to say about that. It's not surprising. It's his third yellow card of the season. So Danny Van Poppel continuing to build a reputation, not in the best way. If we move on to stage 4, which was today's stage, this was always going to be a little bit more exciting. With all these short, punchy little hills in the last 50K, along with a late intermediate sprint, this was sure to be an exciting finish. And the real question was, would any of the punchy sprinters hold on, or was it going to be one for the GC guys, Pogacar sprinting against Vingegaard. And of course, there's one rider that bridges the gap between those two categories, and that's Mathieu van der Poel. So he was the strong favorite for today. As it played out, the GC teams did really light it up on the last couple stages, and Mathieu van der Poel did hold on to contest the finish alongside the biggest climbers in the race, but he was pipped on the line by Tadej Pogacar, who had a stronger sprint. Mathieu van der Poel, you just saw the fatigue in his legs from those really pulling back the lead group of sprinters and their key or lead group of GC guys and their key domestiques, and he almost had to sit down in the last 20 meters of the race. He couldn't continue his sprint all the way to the line. So super impressive from Tadej Pogacar. Also very impressive from Mathieu van der Poel to just make it to the finish line, but he couldn't make it happen today. Noteworthy that Gregoire and Onley were right up there in the finish, and both of these guys have been, doing well on these punchy stages, and I'm liking the looks of both of them for the fantasy league right now. Fortunately, Onley is classified as a leader, but Gregoire is an all-rounder, so he's a little bit easier to pick up. I also want to note that Wout van Aert wasn't particularly competitive in the finish here. He was there working for Vingegaard potentially. At one point, I saw Vingegaard's second position in the Visma train that was leading the race with Wout van Aert fourth or fifth back, and so I thought they might be working for him. Whether or not they were working for him at that point, which was on the last climb or maybe second to last climb, he didn't have the legs, and so he finished 30 seconds back off the front group, wasn't able to contest the final sprint. Still good to see him up there, but certainly not peak Wout van Aert that we would hope to see from years past. Also, Vauquelin continued to hold on to his white jersey and was right up there in the finish. So even though he says he's going for stages and he's certainly been lighting it up in these first couple punchy stages, he's still high up in the GC. So we don't really know what to expect from him. He might be someone that we want to hold on to through the mountains. I'm guessing probably not. I'm guessing we're going to want to hold him for the next three stages for his, decent ITT, along with two more punchy stages where he's sure to be active, and then trade him out for someone like Remco. We'll see how that plays out. But I'm very happy with Vauquelin on my team as of right now. If we go over and look at the fantasy points for today, Tadej Pogacar takes the lead, but we had Lenny Martinez, who was in a break for most of the day and then also got most combative. He was solo off the front for the last bit of that break. He had the second most points. So if you doubled up Lenny Martinez, you actually wouldn't have lost any points compared to someone who doubled up Tadej Pogacar today. They scored the same exact number of points on the stage. Of course, because Tadej Pogacar has the jersey points, his total points was a lot higher. But Lenny Martinez looked really good today. He also just was clearly putting it all in for that break to work and held on for some mountain points. So he's up there in the polka dot jersey where there's not too many other folks who have even earned a single point yet, which is good. Along with him in the breakaway were Abrahamsen, Asgreen, and Gachenard. It's good to see these guys there, especially Jonas Abrahamsen. He's been saying on social media that and to the media that he's been feeling good. He doesn't feel like his shoulder's holding him back, and we saw that he was in the break all day today. He took uncontested, I'll note, but he took the intermediate sprint and also looked like he was fighting for the single KOM point that was on offer before the break was caught, but he was looking the wrong way at the wrong time, and Casper Asgreen made the perfect attack to take that single KOM point. But these guys scored a lot of points because it's a long breakaway. If we go over to the Global Fantasy League, this is the team of Steph DeBZH, who's currently the global leader in the league. I think they've already made a few trades on their team, so the current leader, you can't necessarily compare your team directly to them because if they've spent more trades than you, then of course they're expected to have more points and vice versa. But it's always good to see who's to date scoring the best and what their team looks like. So I'm glad to say my team's pretty similar to this team, but the key thing here is that he's had Girmay for the first three stages where Girmay's been earning a lot of points, and then also had Lenny Martinez, who picked up a nice 227 points today. So pretty nice looking team. If we look just at the leaders of the Team JFJ League, Luca 26 is leading with a team that, again, looks pretty similar to mine, but he's got some interesting mid to low cost riders that have been picking up some nice points. So he's had Leknesson and Blackmore and Amaral, who have been doing well in earlier stages this tour, but also he has Gachenard, who was a cheap rider that was in the break today, the cheapest rider in the break. So it was a nice pick for him. He, of course, has these three big riders that match my team as well. Speaking of which, let's look at my team. So I've actually made two trades already in this tour. First, I traded out Wout van Aert for Kevin Vauquelin 2 days ago. I've been really happy with that. And then last night, I traded out Jonathan Milan for Jonas Vingegaard because we're coming into a stretch of stages where Milan's not going to be scoring any points outside of his 30 points per day for holding the green jersey. Maybe he'll go in a break. I don't really expect it. Maybe he will be able to get some intermediate sprint points if the breakaway is small. But I don't think he's going to be scoring very much in the next few days. Certainly, he won't have a great ITT. Whereas Vingegaard, you can see, is already scoring 200 points today. He's high up in a bunch of jersey competitions. He's going to do well in the ITT tomorrow. So I was happy that I picked up Vingegaard today. I was expecting it would be more of a climber's day, with Mathieu van der Poel being the one rider, as I mentioned, that is a punchy rider that can fall into the same category as the climbers on a day like today. Unfortunately, I lost out on about 100 points if I would have selected Pogacar as my road captain, but hard to predict that. It was a wash between the two. Van der Poel was the favorite, so I'm happy with my selection. In retrospect, it would have been better to pick Pogacar. Now, things start to get very interesting when we look ahead to tomorrow. And at the minute, I am not personally planning to make any trades for tomorrow. However, that is for several key reasons. First of all, I already have Pogacar on my team. If you don't have him on your team, I don't know what you're doing, but put him on your team. Second of all, I've already sold my big sprinter. I've already sold Milan. If you still have Merlier and Milan, it might be worth trading them out for one of the big GC, TT, climber type guys that are going to be scoring points in the next few stages. Um, and the third reason is that my third leader slot is already occupied with someone who has a decent TT. If I had just Pogacar and Vingegaard and I had some other, Biniam Girmay or some other rider in this slot that isn't likely to be doing well in the TT or the next two stages, I might consider picking up Remco or Vauquelin. Remco versus Vauquelin, I don't know exactly who's going to score more points. Probably Remco if you can afford him. But we'll get to that in a moment. In any case, at the moment, I'm not recommending any changes. Now, let's look at the stage itself for tomorrow, stage 5. So tomorrow is the first individual time trial of the tour. It's 33 kilometers. It's extremely flat with only 191 meters of gross elevation throughout the course. It's looking very similar to the 2024 Olympic TT in Paris, which Remco Evenepoel won. So similar length, similar amount of climbing, pretty flat, a couple little bumps, but no no categorized climbs. I think that that's a good one for us to look at to evaluate, what the finishing time might be. But before we get there, just looking at the favorites, if we trust the bookies are saying that Remco is a huge favorite. Much shorter odds than anyone else, with Jonas Vingegaard actually just barely beating out Tadej Pogacar for second place. So this goes to what I was saying before, where if you don't have three leader slots already tied up, it might be worth picking up Remco because even though he's 58 seconds down on GC, he's such a strong flat TT rider. He's so small and aerodynamic that he's likely to put time into both of these guys. Now, there has been a lot of talk, especially before the tour, of Remco picking up yellow after tomorrow's ITT. I'm not sure that he actually can hold off a minute on Tade. I think that it's likely that Tade will be in the yellow after tomorrow, but we'll see. I'm open to be proven wrong. Of note, Kevin Vauquelin is pretty high up in the short list of favorites. No one expects him to win, but he is a pretty good TT rider. And for those of you who already have him on your team, lucky you, because we didn't quite pick him up exactly for his TT. We picked him up because he's in the white jersey. He's been active in these punchy stages. He said he's going for these stages rather than GC. So he's been a great pickup for us, anyways, in this phase of the tour. But it's just icing on the cake that he's going to hopefully do well tomorrow. I really hope that. Now, an interesting feature of tomorrow's stage in the fantasy game is that for each of the ITTs, tomorrow being the first of the two, you have the opportunity to earn up to 100 extra points on the stage in the fantasy game by guessing correctly the finishing time of the winner of the stage. So this is not a huge amount of points, but it's nothing to scoff at. And so I think it's worth doing some basic analysis to make this guess as well thought out as possible. So to do that, I've got a spreadsheet that I've been maintaining for the last year or two, which just keeps track of the results of previous individual time trials in Grand Tours. I don't have all major Grand Tours. I don't have Olympics, World Championships, those are a little bit harder to compare apples to oranges because there's not fatigue in the legs. The people are able to peak for that one race as opposed to having to plan for a 3 week Grand Tour. So I like looking at just the Grand Tour TTs, even though I said the profile of the Olympic TT in Paris last year is very similar to stage 5 of this year's tour. I'd rather compare it to similar stages on Grand, first weeks of Grand Tour, ideally, maybe. So the real thing we're looking for is what was the speed of the winner, the average speed across the course of the winner. And this is important because all of these are different distances, of course. And so you can't just look at the finishing time, you have to look at the finishing speed. What speed was each rider able to hold over that duration? And take that speed to inform what we guess that we will estimate the speed of tomorrow's stage will be, and then back calculate that into the finishing time using this stage 5 distance, which is 35 kilometers. By the way, if anyone knows of a way to get a more accurate distance estimate beyond a tenth of a kilometer, I'm sure someone out there knows the exact distance of this course. If anyone knows what it is or how to find that, please put a comment below. I'd love to find out. At the moment, I'm just basing my calculations off the assumption that it's 33.0 kilometers. In any case, let's look at some similar stages. So the one that really stands out to me is the 2023 Vuelta Stage 10, won by Filippo Ganna. It was a flat TT, similar distance, similar amount of climbing, that is to say, not very much. It was won by Ghana with Evenepoel in second place, and they both averaged around 55, 50, close to 56 kilometers per hour. I'm not quite sure that we will reach this high of a speed, but I think this is a good baseline for us to be looking at in terms of what Remco can do on a flat course like this. Of course, we could look at the Tour de France last year, where Remco won stage 7, where he only averaged 52.5. But this was a hilly stage, and it had a categorized climb of 6.5% for 1.6 kilometers. There were also some other lumps in it. So I don't think that we're quite looking at this speed. I would view this as a lower bound on the estimated speed for the winner tomorrow. And I would view something like the 2024 Vuelta as an example of perhaps a higher bound, even though this was won by Brandon McNulty, who is none of the big three GC guys in this year's tour. This was a pure flat TT of a shorter distance in the first stage of the Grand Tour. So this is sort of the high end of what I would expect anyone to be able to do tomorrow. And the 2024 stage 7 TT is maybe what I would expect as a low end. So I'm going to be looking at something between 52.5 to 56, 57 as the range that I'm looking at. Now, you might be asking, all right, you've got an estimated speed. How do we convert that to a time? Well, you could do the math yourself, or you could just come here and use the time calculator that I've built. So feel free to make a copy of this spreadsheet. There's a link in the description and also in our Discord server. And you can just directly calculate speed here, whatever speed you want to any number of decimal points. I could say 53.576, and it will tell me to the nearest second that's for a 33.0 kilometer course that is 36 minutes 57 seconds. Or if you just want to get a view at a glance of how changing your speed estimate will change your time estimate, you can just look at this table here, where for every 1 kilometer I've done the calculation for time. So for 33 kilometers, and of course you can update this if it was a longer TT, these times would change, but for 33 kilometers, I think that we're going to be looking at something in this range, which is to say between 38.5 and 35.21. Personally, I'm thinking it's going to be kind of right smack dab in the middle. I think 36.5 is a decent estimate. But that's not going on a whole lot besides just comparing recent stage profiles and finding the middle ground between either end of the spectrum that I might expect. So I encourage you to use the tools at your disposal to think about this a little bit. And if you're really looking for just an easy answer, pick somewhere around a high 36 minutes and seconds, some number of seconds. So 36.40 for 54 kilometers, not too bad. If you guess this, you're probably not going to be exactly right, but you won't be too far off. So you're not going to lose too many points on your nearest competitor. All right, with that, I think that wraps it up for today's video. Thanks for sticking with me. I'm really excited to see how tomorrow shakes up the standings in the yellow and white jerseys. And I will see you guys in a couple days for the next recap. Good luck.